Oh, yeah. I erased my SD card, so if you get a copy of it, you might want to keep it in case they close my YouTube channel. Yeah. Now, we were talking about punitive damages and the actual facts, FACTS, of the Matthew Shepard case. Yeah. Um, it doesn't have to do with sexual orientation. It has to do with law enforcement participating and having knowledge of harassment, torture, and torment. Now, these clear and convincing evidence to establish punitive damages to sign right here. Yeah. Requiring proportionately and punitive damages so that the punishment fits the offense. And then enacting federal legislation to address the special problem of multiple punitive damage awards. Yeah. This would protect against unfair overkill, guard against possible due process violations, yes, and help preserve the ability of future claimants to recover basic out-of-pocket expenses and damages for their pain and suffering. Yeah. 32 states have reformed their punitive damages laws. 4 states had reforms struck down as unconstitutional and have not enacted additional reforms. Now, I'm big on this whole concept of the due process violations. Yes. Let's take 2011. Heidi wasn't a resident, my sons weren't a resident, and I didn't receive any notice or opportunity to be heard. 2012. You know, due process doesn't seem to be understood by Commissioner Basin. But I mentioned that you can't have 3 no contact orders at the same time. Yeah. I mentioned that if you don't give me notice, then I don't have the opportunity to be heard. Yes. I mentioned Judge Landis that I was an immigrant in Washington. Yeah. But it seems that a homeless indigent citizen of the United States has no rights. Yes. Now, the Center for Forensic Services at the Washington State Hospital. Yes. Western State Hospital. We're going to have a telephone testimony and information at the cell hearing next Friday. Yeah. And I'm not rational. Isn't that right? Uh-huh. Uh, well, maybe somebody's familiar with it. Right. Now, I know it seems stupid, okay? Unless the respondent or respondent's lawyer was present at the hearing. This order must be served on the respondent. You served the first order on the respondent on Guam. Yes. Yes. hmm The second order you issued by minute order while I was on trial. The third order you modified and you served me after you'd had the court hearings when I didn't have any due process. The fourth protection order you served or you attempted to serve on me after I left the county 10 weeks later.
Code Red Drill, loading dock by Central Supply. Code Red Drill, loading dock by Central Supply. Code Red Drill, loading dock by Central Supply.
Now, just looking at it, yes. You put it in publication. You said that you mailed it to some address, and the police department, the sheriff's department, contacted me and served me notice of the court hearing. Yes, but it was very intimidating. And then you're on before the next business day. Yeah. You didn't serve me the protection order that was issued in 2013. I personally went to the police department when I got back here from Centralia. Yes. And asked them, is there something that I need to know? Ouch. And then I waited a year for it to expire, and you decided to reissue it without any due process. You had court hearings 48 days after you had issued the temporary protection order. Yes. There is no actual signature of the petitioner. This is a forgery. Yeah. This is probably a forgery. Yes. Yes, yes. And you're wanting to limit the amount of punitive damages. Well, I'm glad they didn't pass that federal legislation because there's Well, there's a limit the award of punitive damages to the greater 3 times the award of compensatory damages, or $500,000. Now, the unlawful employment practices of those in law enforcement. Why exactly are you in law enforcement? And then there's when the defendant's action is motivated by financial gain. Punitive damages are limited to the greater 4 times compensatory damages. Now, let's say I sued each sheriff for the hate crime. Yeah. Of violating my rights for 7 years and 5 months, issuing a dissolution of marriage where there was no due process, and then allowing for my sons to be kidnapped, held hostage, and enrolled in school 2 grades behind where they should be. Now, these compensatory, the greater 4 times the greater, or $7 million. For every sheriff, police officer, FBI agent, TSA agent, Homeland Security person, yes, I think it should be $7 million for each of them. And when you add two, well, let's say it was 3 million individuals that actually have liability. You have the sworn oath of office, as well as the candidacy form, yes. And just looking at a calculator, okay, I think $7 million for each of you,
Code red
yes.
drill. Loading dock by Central
7 million,
Supply,
yeah.
all clear.
Seven,
Code red
one,
drill,
two,
all
three,
clear.
7 million
Code red drill,
times
all clear.
3 million, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 equals, 2.1 and 13 zeros after it. Yes. Now, you said I wasn't a trillionaire, that I was delusional. Well, you want to look at Matthew Shepard, exactly what happened? Yeah. I don't think, I really don't think that Matthew Shepard being a homosexual had anything to do with it other than it gave certain people a reason to make fun of him. Yes. But if I look at the actual legislation, because that's what we're talking about, um, it involves the budget of the Department of Defense. Yes. Now, I know you say that I don't know how to think, but let's say I looked at the budget of the Department of Defense. Yes. hmm Could you give me approximately what it costs to run the United States Department of Defense, inclusive of all the branches of the military? The last estimate that I had was somewhere around $650 billion. Yes. hmm And you're saying, well, we need all that money. We have to spend it. Now, for police departments to not realize the material, the well, the reasoning why the Judges Advocate Corps should be involved. Let's say we cut the budget because I decide to sue every attorney there. Yes. And we just didn't have the money. Sued each and every one of you for $7 million. And you say, well, you can't do it. But I did read a good portion of the actual legislation. Yeah, yeah. Beaten, tortured, and left to die near Laramie on the night of October 6th of 1998. Uh, the murder that changed America. Vanity Fair. Yeah. But there's actually some legislation. Let's just see here. Law. Trope. Now, as I remember it, the involvement of law enforcement in doing one of these, yes. Now you're saying a cell hearing and incarcerating me. Oh, the Matthew Shepard Hate Crimes Prevention Act, PDF. It actually does involve the budget of the Department of Defense. Yes. And I'm just see if I can download it. Nope, I guess I can't there. Oh wait, it did. It does let me do it. It's 5:48. Yeah. Um, I'm not in a big hurry. Okay, I got about an hour before they close, and I just bought another cup of coffee. Yes. Now, when you look at all of those in law enforcement that have knowledge of RI.PDF and the forgery, the fraud, the misrepresentation, the kidnapping, the abuse, the false arrest, um, it's called the Matthew Shepard Hate Crime Prevention Act of 2009. Yes, yes, yes. Now just have a look through it, okay? because it's kind of a good one. Yes. Uh-huh. It does actually make it a federal offense to not 467 pages. My gosh, look at all that. Boop, 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 boop. Now, look at all the people who participate in National Association of School Psychologists. Why don't we go through the Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities? Yes. CNN article? Yeah. Uh-huh. The AAIDD, the AAPD, yeah. The AMRPA. The American Psychological Association. Yeah. Hmm. The Amputee Coalition of America. Now, the Council of State Administrators. Ouch. Could you give me every member of this epilepsy foundation? Yes. And the National Association of School Psychologists? Yes. I'd just like to know how many school psychologists think right now. I'm sorry. When your crime affects the actual budget of the United States Department of Defense, and I ask for all the employees of the DOD, when I get to soon, and I will, the National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives? Yes, yes, yes. Family Equality Council? Um, maybe you should read legislation before you talk about the laws because, the Anti-Defamation League, Leadership Conference on Civil Rights Hate Crime Task Force, Michael Lieberman, it reminds me of a Joseph Lieberman, yes. Then Local Law Enforcement Hate Crime Prevention Act of 2009, endorsing organizations, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I would just real. I was reading you have an educational fund. Yes. How many retarded black people are in the wrong grade right now?